Good afternoon, family. Welcome back again to Karating. As you can see today, we are filming from the village right outside, keeping the kids engaged with some outdoor activities. Now, again, thank you again for coming back to watch our video. Please watch till the end, and if this content interests you, we hope you subscribe. Anyway, so we've been talking a lot about moving back to Kenya. And today's video is going to do the exact opposite, moving the other direction. Now, lots of returnees and diasporans have families and friends who desire to move to diaspora. And there's some things that we try to explain that are often hard to really nail down, especially particular folks who've never been to diaspora. And so in today's discussion, I'm going to talk about some of the things folks need to think about before they decide to move to diaspora. Because in truth, diaspora is not for everybody. And this video is not to discourage anyone from moving to diaspora, not at all. I'm just going to present a case for those who are ready to move and those who really should not move. So I'm going to begin by talking about the potential reasons why people typically move to diaspora. And then we'll talk about specific indicators for those who are ready to move, and then the indicators of those who really are not prepared to move at this time. And then in the end, I'll summarize by just highlighting some of the decision points folks need to keep in mind before they make that choice to abandon their lives in Kenya or in Africa for life in diaspora. So let me start by talking about reasons, some of the common reasons why we move to diaspora. Reason number one, a lot of us move for newer educational opportunities. And that is not to say that back in Kenya we don't have great opportunities. We do, we absolutely do. But sometimes you just need something different. I've seen folks who are taking kids who are going through kindergarten through 12. That's less common. The more common group is often those who are traveling for tertiary colleges and grad school. Particularly, I've seen folks who are traveling to go take aviation courses. I've got friends who are pilots now, having gone to aviation. Those who are doing nursing and other technical programs that don't take 4 years. My experience, as well as many of others, was traveling for graduate school. One of the biggest advantages of going to graduate school in diaspora is that oftentimes there are a lot more scholarship opportunities through graduate assistantships and things like that. And it often takes a much shorter time. I knew for a fact that if I did my graduate school in Kenya, there's no way I would have finished my degrees within the time that I did in diaspora. So for me, it was largely about opportunity, yes, but I knew it was going to take me a shorter time to go through a master's and PhD in a more comprehensive way compared to the option I had in Kenya. Now, in some countries, they actually have free education. America does not. The only difference is that there may be more scholarship opportunities, again, depending on which school, whether it's a state school, a private school, and so many other factors. But America does not have free education, except for citizens who only get free education up to high school. After that, folks typically have to pay. Now, the other group that moves to diaspora, of course, moves because of job opportunities. There are many people who work in diplomatic circles, work for NGOs, or actually work for the US government. And then the second group are those who have the right work visas, whether it's H-1B, H-2B, J-1, J-2, F1, and other temporary work visas that are given, say, to asylees or agricultural workers and things like that. So people who have right work visas or people who are moving as immigrants often have opportunities to work in diaspora. And in many cases, the pay is often higher, again, compared to Kenya. The work benefits can also be attractive, again, depending on who you work for. For instance, many employers offer healthcare coverage, retirement benefits, vacation, paternity and maternity leave. Even though when you compare America to Europe, America is absolutely terrible when it comes to maternity and paternity leave. And then, of course, as far as work is concerned, there's lots of legal protections against discrimination, whether it's gender-based, disability, and things like that. In fact, one of the things I absolutely love about America is that legally there's lots of protection for people with all kinds of disabilities. Legally, if you have a disability within certain conditions, your employer is required to provide accommodations right from the stage of application. all the way to being hired and working. Now, this does not mean that terrible things happen. A lot of people get discriminated against despite the fact that the law is there. The main distinction here is that if you choose to pursue or take legal action, then there's potential that somebody can get in trouble. But I absolutely love the disability accommodations that we have for people with disabilities. And I'm not even talking about things like having a ramp or an elevator and things like that. There's a lot of accommodations for even invisible disabilities. So with work, there's certain really good things that I've seen in America. But remember, again, terrible things still happen even with all those protections. And then the issue of safety. Some people move to diaspora to seek asylum, especially people who have experienced war or people who identify as LGBTQ and things like that. So those opportunities are there. And then there's a group of people who simply move to diaspora just to start all over, especially folks who had broken relationships, people who have experienced trauma. I've seen a few folks who have gone through incest and all kinds of violent acts. And so living in Kenya for them can be traumatic. And so moving to diaspora can give such a person a chance to just restart life. And this also includes people who just want to reboot, especially late career adjusters. I've seen folks who've been teachers for like 40 years and then they move to the US and then they switch into something else. And so this group of people who change at some point have opportunities to start all over. And then, of course, for medical reasons, there are a number of people who move to diaspora to access healthcare. Of course, America has amazing doctors and facilities. However, they have one of the worst healthcare system in terms of cost, efficiency, and things like that. But people who require specialized care can sometimes move and really find really good doctors. And then with regard to kids, there are people who prefer just different education systems. And so they move to diaspora to get their kids perhaps to go through American education system, which I think you can also get in international schools locally. And then, of course, for family reunion, folks who are family over, if you leave your spouse in Kenya, you may join your spouse in diaspora. And then there's this group of folks who just want to see the world, just curious, go for vacation and things like that. Then I've also seen high net worth folks who just want to go get quote unquote the Maju treatment. And then the last reason has to do with status. Some people just like the idea that they send their kids to go to school in America for whatever reason. And that might also include folks who go to diaspora to have kids. If your child is born in the US, they're likely going to acquire US citizenship unless you are a diplomat. It's actually illegal to travel to the US just to have kids for citizenship. But it happens. People travel and then you get kids and that happens too. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to highlight two different groups: people who should move to diaspora and people who are not ready to move to diaspora. So who should move to diaspora? Number one, people who are looking for grad school opportunities. If you want to do a master's or a PhD program. As I mentioned earlier, our grad school systems are a lot easier to navigate compared to what I have heard about in Kenya. I never went to grad school in Kenya, but the stories I hear cause me a little pause. So if you're looking for grad school opportunities, yes, this would be good, because oftentimes it takes a much shorter time, even though they may be expensive. It takes a much shorter time, and then there are scholarship opportunities. Undergrad, maybe not, because they're usually a lot more expensive. Now, let no one tell you that a Kenyan degree is worthless. That will depend. Now, if you're a medical doctor and you want to become a doctor in the US, then your undergrad MD degree may be a little tough to transition using it. If you're a teacher and you have your bachelor's degree, no problem. If you're a nurse, same thing. So it just depends on what degree you have. Now, the second group of folks who I think should move to the US are people who are willing to take up any opportunity. So if you show up and things change and they ask you to become a plumber, you do it. People who are very flexible in that sense are ready to move. And then, of course, people who are raised properly. People who know how to live with people. If you are raised with boundaries, you know where your boundaries are, you are clean, you have just basic common sense, which is often trouble for a lot of folks. And then people who are willing to follow house rules. I've seen people who move into their brothers' houses and they start running the show as if they're the owners there. So just learning to live with people. If you cannot work with kids, please don't come. If you can't follow rules, please don't come. If you can't cook, so generally, if you want to send your child to the US, make sure they are raised properly and they can live with people. Because when they're not raised properly, they end up giving a lot of headache to their host. And then if you have a hustling spirit, you're yearning for more and willing to do the work, then you're ready to move. And then if you are eligible for the right visa, and this would be a big topic we'll explore later on, then you are ready to move. So who should not move? Number one, those who are economically settled and you are doing well, thriving. It's sometimes America can actually set you back. So if you're doing well economically, you may not need to move. And then if you have drug and alcohol problems, you may not come back alive. Mr. Know-it-all, people who cannot learn, you know everything right from the word go, please stay home. And then medical doctors, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot harder for doctors to transition from Kenya to the US and become doctors. They can, but it's a very different pathway. And then if you're having family issues, don't move because likely you're going to break apart. People who have trouble following rules, please stay home because the potential of getting in trouble is very high in diaspora. And as I mentioned earlier too, folks who are not raised properly, have trouble with common sense, are wedded to traditional gender roles, please stay home. If you expect to come back home, sit there and expect your wife is working 16 hours to come and cook for you and all that, please stay home, don't come. Of course, if you have trouble with being clean, following rules, and sharing space, then you're not ready for diaspora. Again, if you're not flexible or have trouble changing, stay home because you'll come to diaspora and things can be very different than you expect. And if you cannot change, you're going to have a hard time transitioning. Now, the last group is what I call late bloomers or perhaps older people. I don't advise old people to move to diaspora. It's often very tough, especially for retirees. You'll probably get really bored. You'll struggle with change. You will likely lose the comforts you had at home. And then on top of that, you have terrible weather. So older folks moving to diaspora may not be a good idea. Well, I hope again this was useful for you. If it was, please subscribe and I will see you in the next. Thank you.